Good morning. We're delighted to introduce one of our featured sessions today on the early childhood education program over the next day and a half. This is called Birth to Third, Universal Pre-K and the Mixed Delivery Reality. We have some incredible leaders who are part of this, and we're thrilled to be offering this via live stream. Dr. Lisa Roy is the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Early Childhood, and she is in the first governor-appointed position, which we hope to see many, many more of as fast as we can see across the country. Don Odean is the Universal Preschool Director at the Colorado Department of Early Childhood. Sherri Valdez, Executive Director of the Early Childhood Council of the San Luis Valley. Shelley Smith, Director of Early Childhood Education Department, Eagle County Schools. And Bryan Lindert is the LCO Director of the Early Childhood Council in also the San Luis Valley. So welcome everyone, and we're thrilled that you're here. And we're going to pass the mic to Lisa, who's moderating.
Thank you so much. So yes, I am the Executive Director of the new Colorado Department of Early Childhood. It's so exciting to think about the fact that, number one, I have a cabinet position that reports directly to the governor, and the governor has early childhood as a priority for the state of Colorado. So I not only meet with cabinet members on a weekly basis to talk about what's going on in early childhood, but I also meet with the governor almost weekly to talk about the launch of our Universal Preschool program, which you're going to hear about today. The other thing that's interesting about having a new department is the state of Colorado hasn't had a new department in over 30 years. So standing this up, trying to get the backbone for the agency started with everything from procurement to HR to systems, developing policies and procedures, having our own communication staff, all of that is supporting the new department. And at the same time, launching a huge initiative statewide. And so again, you're going to get to hear about that. The only other thing that I wanted to mention, which Carol alluded to, is that there aren't very many states that have a cabinet level position. And Colorado is also unique because in my role, I have rule promulgation. So I have a policy advisory committee that supports me in making decisions, but there's no one in the country that actually gets to promulgate their own rules for the state. It gives us a certain amount of flexibility, which is important, and if something doesn't work, we don't have to wait a whole year to change it. We can change it in a month if we need to. So really appreciate this opportunity to work for Governor Polis. I've appreciated all of the people who have supported Universal Preschool and the start of the new department. And now I'm going to hand it over to Don Odean to lead us in this conversation around the launch of Universal Preschool. We look forward to a question and answer later, and I will be asking our panel some questions as well. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dawn. I'm the director of the Universal Preschool Program for Colorado. I'm going to give a brief overview, as Dr. Roy mentioned, of our startup program that begins this fall. And I'm excited to get into a dialogue with all of you for what questions you might have for us, including our local coordinating organization Voices, which is one of the things that is very unique to Universal Preschool in Colorado. So, wanted to start with truly the years of effort that it's taken the community to get to this point in Colorado, and feel just truly humbled and fortunate to be in this role because of that. When we were able to get to a proposition to get to a tax to support early childhood and universal preschool, decades of work had been done across the community, and it's really truly an incredible effort, and Coloradoans recognized that and supported it, and that's what helped us get to this point. That led us to a specific bill that we all know here in Colorado is House Bill 221295 that helped define the department. But the bill wasn't just written knowing these funds were coming. It too was a collective effort of voices from around the state. We had an early childhood leadership commission in place with the governor and with some incredible leadership to ensure collective voice in the writing of that bill. I think all of us here today were a part of that effort in our way from our perspective at the time, and feel truly that our voices are part of the bill, which is about 500 pages long. So we know that the voices really are there from around the state to consider what's best for us here in Colorado. So feel very appreciative of that. One big part of standing up the new program is that it had to be done quickly. We wanted to get those funds in and get them to families and ensure that providers were covered for a cost of care. It isn't a voucher program, but rather, I'd say two main priorities for us were to ensure families could find that just right provider around the state, and then to ensure that we created a rate through the rule promulgation process, which is also a little bit unique. But exciting because there are voices from around the state as a part of that as well. But what we were able to create right away was catchment areas around the state. So 32 local coordinating organizations to ensure that we continued that collective voice. And in starting up this quickly, that's been a challenge, and it's been incredible to get us to this point. And so I'm excited to talk more about that with you all as we move into the discussion section. We did launch provider enrollment last fall. We launched a new family application system this January, and we've been going through matching rounds to get families enrolled for this fall. We have about 2,000 providers around the state who are participating with us in what we call mixed delivery, which ensures that families have options of providers, not only in school district settings, but also in-home family care, as well as center-based and community programs. And so another very unique consideration for Colorado, but we heard very strongly from families that that was important. So for families to be able to gain access around the state, they can enter into this new system that we've built to seek and find and filter through what they're looking for to meet their family's needs. And so that portion was a priority stand-up for us to hopefully eliminate some of the Hunger Games culture we've had around trying to find childcare, get on wait lists, get signed up. So we really have been thoughtful about making that as easily accessible for families as possible, regardless of where they are, and so that they can find, again, that just right provider. Our LCOs around the state are the navigators locally, ensuring that providers are connected, ensuring that families are connected, and the lift of a new application and matching enrollment process is a big one, and so we haven't been able to do that sitting here in Denver. That's something that has taken everyone around the state to ensure that we're connected, and really has been a pioneering effort, and I think we've all learned a little bit more about technology in that effort as well. The aim for our local coordinating organizations is to really support the strength-based assets that each community brings and consider what challenges they might have, so that we can comprehensively, for all early childhood resources, ensure that we're supporting from the state program those local needs and learning from the strengths around the state. We are starting with the launch of the Universal Preschool program with that effort in mind, and I think that's taken a majority of our time and probably a good place to start for us to get kiddos in program this fall. A couple other things that are really important to us was to ensure that we considered differently than Colorado has before how we fund, how much money providers get, so that we had a rate that really looked at the actual cost of care and helped us push forward better pay for workforce to ensure that we are able to have the capacity to serve the children in the state for that year before kindergarten. And so couldn't completely close that gap in year one with our rate, but went through a process with stakeholders and with a vendor to calculate a formula that really honored what the actual work costs and also make considerations, again, locally for differences in costs around workforce and facilities and so forth. So we were able to get that in place. We have about 31,000 children right now matched to a provider for this fall. Payments will start to our providers with a prepayment, and then we will be able to pay monthly to our providers to ensure that we're matching the children they have served and support sustainability in being able to deliver on a high quality program setting for our children. We are fortunate, as Dr. Roy mentioned, to have leadership in the state from our governor, who cares very deeply about early childhood and about universal preschool. In that, we have set forth what we call wildly important goals, WIGs, if you will, that the governor helps track and stays in consistent touch with the program because he does care very deeply and is in support of everything going well. And so we're really appreciative of that, and that certainly has helped our effort in such a quick turn. We have had some challenges in startup, as you might imagine. One of the things we're really excited about is that because of the new department and the new processes and the engagement from state leadership, we're able to be relatively nimble. And so I came on board in August. Dr. Roy, I think you were just ahead of me. Our LCOs were signing on right about the same time. And we really have been learning together and focused on being responsive. While we have had some challenges come up, I think when we look back, we'll recognize that we're able to address those pretty quickly and make adjustments as we go forward. Also set forth for us in statute is a pretty robust evaluation process over the next 3 years. So really to help us with that continuous improvement mindset. Starting up a new program in state government has unique challenges in itself, but being able to have that evaluation process in place is really going to help us be responsive and guide us to be as efficient as possible as we grow. So I will stop talking now so we can get to some discussion or questions. Hopeful that you have some of those for us. If not, we certainly have some that we've heard often that we can address.
Don, thank you so much for the overview. So we have the LCOs here and really appreciate you making the trek. What I'd like to do is for you to describe your region, why you applied to be an LCO, if you don't mind, and then also just to talk about specifically the mixed delivery system. How does that come into play for you, and what experiences did you have previously through your work in supporting mixed delivery?
So I'm Shelley Smith, and I'm up in Eagle County, the Eagle River Valley, which is basically Vail, almost to Glenwood.Zero. And we were unique in our LCO that we actually applied to change our catchment area and got the response, had lots of questions, but again, talking about being responsive to community needs, our application was submitted, and I think it's thus far been successful because we were able to move work that we were already doing in partnership with a nonprofit organization. And so since we already were moving forward, it was nice to just continue. But it's augmented having us be formal now. That relationship where it used to be, I have a specific example of a family. We were able to help a family move from one program to the other because we knew it was going to meet the needs at the organization level, so the family didn't have to do the navigation. And we're really looking every application. We're also the Head Start grantee. If it comes in as a Head Start grantee, then we help them get into universal preschool. And then if they don't qualify for Head Start, they get all the providers, which they didn't even know those other providers had subsidies. So for us, even though we're the school district, and a lot of times people think we're competing, we think the mixed delivery makes sure that families get services, that they're going to stay in, they're going to have better attendance. So we want it to be their local provider that meets their needs, because often they have younger siblings, and if that program outside of the school district makes sure that those children get to the program and get the services and is less stressful on the families, to us that's way more important than, again, like you said, trying to compete against each other. So we have felt the collaboration make it stronger. And another example is the county or the town of Eagle just passed lodging tax, and the funds are going to be dedicated to early childhood in Eagle County. So we had this roadmap report where we always got together and talked about what we wanted to do, and if we just had the funding. And so now there's some funding coming from the state, there's some funding coming from our local community, which I think is they're learning about the importance of early childhood at the state level, so they're bringing also at the local level. So for our community, it's just really leveraged some things that were in place and solidified partnerships and made them stronger.
Since Bryan and I are here together from the same community, I'll probably talk about the community and he can get into the details of the work right now. But I am Sherri Valdez from the Early Childhood Council in the San Luis Valley, and we're located in south central Colorado. We cover about 8,000 square miles. Excuse me, and 6 counties and 14 school districts. We have been an early childhood council since the year 2000, when it was actually a child care pilot project. And we went to our community when the LCO application had gone out. We went to our community and gathered representatives from all the school districts, from family child care, our community partner centers, and had that discussion. And this also included others that we had worked with in all domains in our work. And we asked them what they wanted to do. How did they want to move forward on the application for local coordinating organization to develop systems and connect our community around universal preschool, but also knowing that eventually we want to be doing that for all early childhood service 0 to 5. And we had several meetings, and it was facilitated, and it came back to the council was the organization that should apply. And so we did that on behalf of that community, and they honored our application. So here we are. And the mixed delivery system, I think, I wanted to speak to that just a bit, has been a great opportunity. You know, families are in care with family child care, and they prefer that setting. They're center-based, and then they're school district-based, and it's really nice to be able to support families in all of those settings where we haven't done that before, specifically family child care.
And if I could speak to the mixed delivery system as well, one of the tremendous assets of the program has been that we have been able to work with that, and it has helped us to maintain access in very remote sections of the valley. So, you know, the valley has fewer than 50,000 people in an area roughly the size of New Jersey. We have lots of really little towns. One of those little towns is Crestone, has a population of about 200. There's one child care provider who was really looking to close their doors prior to UPK rollout. They are staying open and maintaining access for the children of that small community as a result of the program. You know, the next closest option would have been Moffett, which also has a population of similar size, and really only the school district providing services there. So that's an example. There are more examples. I could talk about Creed. I could talk about a lot of sort of the smaller communities, rural parts of the state, that as a result of this program are able to either maintain the access they had, or potentially expand access. So we just talked to yet another family child care provider last week. So small incremental but positive changes on that front.
Thank you so much. Well, one of the data points I'd like to share that there's approximately 62,000 children in the year before they enter kindergarten that could have access to universal preschool. And as Don mentioned, we have about 31,000. So we're at the 50% mark already. With round 1 and round 2, we know that there will be children applying into the fall when school starts, and that is exciting. We are exceeding what our estimates were, because we estimated that total there would be 50%, and we're more than likely, and in fact, I don't even want to say, because if I say, I'm going to be wrong, which is a great thing. But we would say that that's unique for the nation. It's unique even for the state of Colorado. Denver Preschool Program has been in existence for quite a while. I believe it passed in 2007, 7 and 8 the first time, and they haven't gotten above 60% with their voucher program. And so just the response that Colorado has been unique again. So we're preparing for that. I would say the other thing that's unique again about having UPK within our department is that we are in charge of licensing and quality and family support programs. Our family support programs include the early childhood councils, which is exciting, family resource centers, early intervention, early childhood mental health, just to name some of our major programs. So again, there's this interesting opportunity with the connections that we have within the department to really connect families to other programs and services. So my next question, again, because this whole focus has been on mixed delivery and the rollout of UPK, are what are some of the challenges? And I'm actually going to include Don in this conversation. Don and I were both directors of early care and education programs for 2 of the largest school districts in Colorado, Denver for me and Jefferson County for Don. And we did have state funding, the Colorado Preschool Program, but for the most part, that funding went primarily to school districts. Some districts, like Denver, did actually subcontract for a mixed delivery system, but that was not statewide. And so I do want to know, what have been some of the challenges in rolling out from a primarily school district run program to this new mixed delivery program?
I don't know what you're talking about. It's easy. Some really interesting challenges, I would say, primarily from, as Dr. Roy mentioned, the shift. So we know that when we have a change, and it's $330 million for families, to providers directly. And so it's incredible, and everyone is on board with that. But the process is different, and there's change associated with that. So probably some of the biggest challenges have been from our providers who didn't participate in the Colorado Preschool Program, which was school district managed. So many of our community providers and our in-home providers, is that they may not have participated in state-funded programming ever. And so that's new. And some people are, jumping in fully with us, and some are slowly learning more, both of which are fair in the change of the work. And again, I would say our LCOs being there locally and being able to have conversations with providers that they know is critical. That isn't something that from the state we can build rapport with 2,000 providers around. We got this. we got this together. And so that's been, I would say, essential in the effort in getting to having 2,000 providers participate. For school districts, it's a loss of control because they managed completely and determined if they partnered with community partners or not. And so they had to let go of that, which is a challenge in itself. And then for both, I would say, having a state enrollment process and not being able to have an individually unique enrollment process is a lot of change. And that change represents very real work. We continue to work on our system to make it more meaningful and relevant and diminish the admin burden of anything that's manual outside of our system. And that will continue to grow in hopes of, for both provider types, to ensure that there's ease in that. But we do know that there's a lot of work associated with that right now, and we know that that's a pretty big change. What that means, though, for families is they truly have access to any provider. We had weights built into the system, hearing from families and providers around continuity of care, siblings in program, as well as employees, children participating. Those are the only weights that are applied prior to the match that happens within the system. So the access for families is just incredible. If you think about, I know even, for myself as a parent, trying to find care, calling during the workday, trying to get a hold of a provider who's likely supervising children, it's hard, and you have to keep making those calls. We were at a point in Colorado, especially during the pandemic, where many providers were charging fees for wait lists, which completely eliminated access for many. And then you still, as the family, had to stay on top of who, where, when you might be able to get in. So super excited about the incredible access that families have through this system, and they can let the system do the work, and they get into the system on match day and they see who they're matched to, only to a provider that they chose. And they can choose 1 to 5 providers of the participating providers, and they go through the algorithm, which is best practices in the IT industry for deferred acceptance algorithms. So as much as the work is hard around that, it's pretty incredible for families. So really excited about that. We are seeing from the first 2 rounds that we've had with the 31,000, pretty equal distribution of matches of families to school district providers as well as non-school district providers, and that's true almost every county in Colorado. So I think that tells us we're doing the right thing. We certainly are leaning into what families are telling us by behaviors that they're taking in the system, and we'll be able to learn a lot from that to be sure that we're responsive to what they're looking for and what they need.
Isn't that fascinating after the technology talk?
Yeah.
The system's choosing for them. And, I think in the end, when we get through the growing pains, that this can be fabulous. But that system choosing has been a real challenge for us. We have supported all of our school districts to have the Colorado Preschool program at some point. And many of those chose to contract with those providers, or they will do it in-house. In a small town, they say, we can do a preschool room. So everyone has had it. So we haven't had a lot of new providers. Bryan could probably speak to that if we've added a couple of brand new folks. But we were very familiar with preschool programming and state funding and had some good relationships. Again, remember, we have 41 licensed providers. And so we have the ability to know each of them. We know the teachers that are on staff. We know the directors. We probably have cell phones, here in my phone. And so that's an advantage to us. But when parents can't go to that school district or to that provider where their kids have gone before, or they know that's where they're going to send them, and just register and go through the old-fashioned paper process, then that's been hard. And it's changing. And so just wanted to point that out. And it's nothing bad, it's just change. And it's about how we'll get through it. But
Is this one on? Yeah. Okay. I can speak to some of the things Dawn was mentioning about with new providers signing on. As an LCO, it really allowed us to have some one-on-one conversations. Those started back in December, and one of the great things that the department did is roll out the provider agreement in a very transparent way 6 months before it had to be signed, and I think that provided those providers with a lot of comfort in that they didn't feel like they had to do it immediately. They had a robust period where they could review it, understand it. We could walk through them step by step, point by point, and also added an amendment to address concerns that came forward from the schools. And so that then allowed and just shows that the department is willing to say, okay, what couple things need to be added, we're going to change that, and we're going to allow time for that to happen. So I think that was a real strength, and was also a real showed the ability of the LCO to walk family child care homes through the process, which of course isn't going to happen probably on a one-on-one basis with someone who's not known in a state office. And then I think the other thing is that they've been taking a deliberative, iterative approach to the quality standards. I think with newer providers, in particular, family child care homes, there's a lot of concern about what curriculum am I going to have to use? What changes are there going to be? Is this going to be too much for me? And the department sort of, I think, wisely said, let's take this transitional year, listen to feedback, and then as a result of that, work with providers in a transitional phase in order to make sure that we get the quality that we want, because it's absolutely critically important, but do it in a way where we ensure that our provider network comes along with us, rather than is sort of, I think, scared away by an abrupt transition.
So I'm going to speak a little differently. I'm going to speak on behalf of school districts, just because I'm an LCO, I'm a Head Start grantee, and oversee the school district. So I hear a lot of the concerns that are coming from school districts. And what resonated with me was the quote from the prior session: same plus the same gets the same. And that's the challenge. We are very fortunate in our community. We were able to do full day. Because of the support, we're actually able to offer extended day. So we are not having this mass exodus to go to private providers unless it meets their needs. So I do think it's a challenge, but I think in the long run, it's going to make the same plus the same change. I think we're going to be more family friendly, whether we're a school district provider or we're a community provider, that in order to meet the family's needs, we're going to have to provide the services that they need as much as possible. And same thing with the provider agreement. I was ecstatic when I saw the health screening, which scares the providers a lot. But it used to break my heart as a Head Start grantee to know that we could offer these comprehensive services and supports to our families, but the private providers didn't have the capacity. So now our Health Service Advisory Committee is going to find a way to do it for everybody. So I think there's a lot of challenges, whether the provider's scared about, I've got to do this new screening, or school districts are, how are we going to meet our federal regulations? We don't know how to do that. Well, that doesn't mean it can't. So we just need to stop thinking that if we don't do it the same way, it's not going to work. But we need to figure out how to do it a new way.
Thank you so much. So Dawn mentioned earlier about the enrollment in what's called the Bridge Care system. I think it's important to clarify that enrollment with the provider is different than enrollment into UPK. The UPK is specifically for the funding and for matching. And we can clarify that a little bit more in a second. I think the other things that were brought up were so important to highlight, and there are differences by region. There are differences by what families need in those regions. Resort communities are very different from some of our rural communities, and even our urban communities vary. So this wisdom in trying to have the LCO be that connector for providers and families is very important. The state cannot respond to local needs as well as an LCO. However, we still need to ensure that our policies overall are flexible enough so that families and providers can get their needs met. And so that example that Bryan just had around standards was one where it was like, if you're new to offering preschool, yes, we have to expect quality, but we need to ensure that there is a pipeline and a continuum to get there. It's interesting, again, my experience with Denver Preschool Program was that when it was first initiated, very few programs were considered high quality. Now the majority are. And that investment in a mixed delivery system makes that difference. So we have variety across the state because some counties were already doing that, but for those where that is new, to invest in children having preschool in a home-based setting, having, again, a department that focuses on quality, that focuses on licensing, and now we'll work with them around the standards and what that looks like and the types of supports is exciting. And I know that's one of Dawn's most favored parts of her job. Not that the others aren't important, but she's really looking forward to that. So my next thing that I'm going to do is unusual. I want you all to be able to ask a question of Dawn and I, the LCOs.
Okay, I've got one. And I know there's a lot of thinking happening about it, but as we have had so much success with families signing up, and as our pot of money is fixed, there's a lot of hope and concern about what will happen with full day funding for targeted populations or those who may qualify. And I guess my biggest hope is how soon we can find out what will happen with all that, as well as the details.
Do you want to go to? Okay. So the way we're set up in Colorado in statute is for every child in the year before they're eligible for kindergarten can access 10 hours a week of preschool for free, which isn't enough. So through our rate process and through our rule process, we were able to further define that in a way that we felt like, and what we heard from families and providers made more sense. So we have an initial rate at the statutory expectation, which we call part-time, 10 hours a week. Then we were able to define half-day, which is considered 15 hours a week minimum. If you think about an elementary school year, school day, in Colorado, typically 6 hours, that's about half time during that program year. And then we defined a full day rate, which is a minimum of 30 hours per week. We did that because our intention is to spend every dollar of the $330 million for children, for families, for providers. And so what we have modeled out with our census tracking data, what we have modeled out with our fund, is that we are able to fund every child in the year before kindergarten at the half-day rate. If they choose a program that offers that, they will get funded for that amount, which is about a $6,000 savings for families over one school year. So super excited about that. Also in statute, what was set forth for us is if we had more money to consider, that we create qualifying factors, so moving from universal to targeted, We went through a rule process to determine those qualifying factors, which are income-based, homelessness, multilingual, or speaking a language other than English, foster or kinship care, and am I missing one? And special education. Yeah, so students who have an individualized education program. Thank you, Shelley. Those children with those qualifying factors are eligible, pending that we have funding still left in the pot, depending on the uptake for the 10 or 15-hour programs. So what Bryan's asking me is, when are we going to know who gets the full day? And we're in the process of that. One of the challenges we've had in this startup year is that hasn't happened soon enough. We really are going to work toward, over the next couple of years, families knowing what they are awarded and providers knowing what funding they'll be able to receive. Program starts in August. We're hoping to get that out in the next few weeks. What also is helpful in statute that helps guide us is if there are unlimited funds, if we spend down more of that initial rate, that we prioritize low income, and if we don't have enough to prioritize that, we prioritize low income plus one, any of the other qualifying factors. And so that's where we're at right now, is considering how can we spend every dollar but still be able to fund if we have 30,000 more kids come for the 10 to 15 hours. And we'll continue to monitor that. Being able to pay monthly allows us to make adjustments. Again, we want to spend the funds, and also one of the pain points is in this first year that we don't know that soon enough. Does that get to it a little? Yeah.
So 2 weeks.
A couple weeks, yeah.
So I think mine might be more for Dr. White. In our community, we're trying to, I'm really excited about UPK, about pulling all the funding for early childhood together. I think that's been an area of segmentation that's caused segmentation in delivery. And in our community, we're trying to pull together resources that, okay, now that we have this funding for UPK, how can we better leverage all the other federal funding, CCAP, Head Start, Early Head Start, and that funding can be focused for birth to 3. I think if we find ways to do that, so I guess I would say at the state level, what opportunities do you see? Because we have different funding, and how can we advocate at the federal level?
Thank you. Well, I cannot advocate at the federal level, so I have to make that clear. But I do inform our federal partners around what our local needs are for the state of Colorado. So that's an important piece. And what I would say is that the department really is birth to 5. So yes, there's a huge focus on launching universal preschool. But I mentioned some of our other programs, and even recently we were able to get bonus funding for providers. And that funding is based on 2 things. One is if you're a UPK provider and you sustain or expand your infant toddler care, you get a bonus. The other thing we did, because we're really concerned about our rural and resort communities having enough slots, that we have given a bonus for what we call under-resourced areas. So that providers can expand. So there's that. There's our new emphasis on workforce and ensuring that we have the workforce for infant toddler care that we need. We're really excited about some of the cross initiatives that we'll be doing with the governor's office around housing and child care. And a lot of people think about a child care program just being in the basement or first floor of a high-rise. Well, there are other types of opportunities with housing. So building a home where you also give a discount to a family to do home-based child care. So again, that's not in a multi-use building. That is in a community where you're acknowledging that home-based childcare could be a part of a community. So we are involved in many different ways, and I look forward to sharing maybe at one of the LCO meetings all the things that we're doing for birth to 3 specifically with early intervention, our home visitation programs, again, our collaboration through family resource centers and early childhood mental health. But we are very committed to birth to 5 and trying to figure out how to break down silos not only at the state level, but supporting those partnerships at the local level.
The other thing I think Shelley's alluding to is maybe a big elephant in the room, that there are other funding streams coming in to help support with different guidelines that might not be completely in alignment with our local state funding model for universal preschool. And it is set forth for us in statute to ensure that we're good stewards of the fund, as we should be, and that we're thoughtful about blending, braiding, stacking, supplementing, not supplanting, and supporting our providers on how we do that. It is a lot to grapple with. Talk about change. But we are grappling with it. We're really digging in on what can we do to start us off right in year 1, and then how can we really look forward to do that better and better, so that it's seamless for families and it isn't additional burden for our providers. And so there's a lot to uplift as a department there, and together locally have some pretty incredible instances around the state that we're learning from, which is really exciting. And then we know we are going to have change in that effort, so that we're ensuring we're getting to families' actual need, and that we're being thoughtful about how we do that in an efficient way.
There's a lot going on, and I understand that, but I'm thinking about evaluation, and I think that's happening on a very regular basis. Is this working, or do we need to shift as we're building, right? But the intent that I saw in the planning process and in the recommendations that were put together by the Early Childhood Leadership Commission was very grounded in local voice, voices from the field we heard from for a long time, a lot of opportunity for different groups of folks across the state representing families, providers, other organizations that had input. I know we have input to the rules now, that is set up that way. But how will you think about evaluating, are we really doing what was intended on the recommendation and what the legislative intent is? Because sometimes we see times when we venture away from the intent of what we were trying to build.
Yeah, I appreciate you uplifting that. Also set forth for us in statute is that we have an outside evaluator and a formalized evaluation plan for our first 3 years. So we have been continuing our work with the ECLC on finding a vendor to do that. It is part of the funding we've received and the expectation that we spend it in that way. And we're about to award to an external vendor who will be our lead evaluator and build out our plan forward in that regard. There's a lot of really good data that we're getting right now that we aren't able to be as efficient or nimble at being responsive to. And this formalized process, the forethought that went into that is pretty incredible. Also feel very fortunate to have that coming so that we can be truly more responsive and get into a regular cadence of reflection and adjustment, so that we can iterate quickly to get to where we need to, but we can also keep our eye on that longer term vision over the next 3 years and imagine that it's a model that will continue. LCOs will be heavily involved in that effort, of course, because of that connection you have with families locally and with providers. And so that will hold us true, all of us together as partners, to the integrity and the intent of what we're set forth to do. So we've done that the best we can in this quick upstart, and we all recognize that we can do that better and look forward to that formalized lift.
And I appreciate that question so much. Again, we do have a formal evaluation, but there also needs to be touch points and feedback loops. And we should have that flexibility to make the changes we need to make. So we are at the end of our session. I want to thank you all so very much for the people that were able to join us, especially online. Thank you for hearing us out, understanding what we're doing to launch the Colorado Department of Early Childhood and our Universal Preschool program with a mixed delivery emphasis. And if anyone in the audience has any questions, you can catch us while we're here. I think all of us will be here today. So thank you very much.